the ground and was suffering the effects of his strokes.
Surgeons had to remove 2 parts of Zach's skull to relieve the swelling. He was in a coma for over a month and couldn't speak for 9 months. For 20 months, he couldn't chew food. He had to learn how to walk again and speak. After months of intense therapy, he had a communication breakthrough.
So my wife told me I was at work, and she called me. She says, "Hey, I want you to hear something." I said, "Right." She put the phone up to Zach. Zach was like, well, and it was very low, not very forceful, but oh, yeah. And then it's and it was pretty powerful.
5 years later, following more intense therapy, Zach walked with his high school class.
Yeah, I was really proud of that to show the kids what he's done.
He's now in community college, taking 1 class at a time. He still has therapy several hours a day.
Zach's injury was preventable. If Zach had just been taken out of the game and remained out, he'd be like any other kid at age now 20. But Zach's life is entirely different because of a very simple precaution that could have been taken.
Now, that precaution is being taken thanks to the Lysted Law, named after Zachary and signed by former Washington Governor Christine Gregoire in 2009. According to the law, athletes under 18 who are suspected of having a concussion are removed from a game and not allowed to return until cleared by a medical professional. 48 states have passed the law. It also has the support of the NFL.
I'm making a difference. I'm making a difference in not only other people's life, but my own life, because it brings me joy to see and that what I've made is like making a difference in other people's lives. And that is what I think God put us on to do, is make a difference.
Say one more time. I'm positive my son won't be as good as he is today if we didn't have financial means to take care of him.
In 2009, the family settled with the Tacoma School District for $14.6 million, money expected to pay for Zach's care the rest of his life. In the last 7 years, Zach's therapy has cost nearly $2 million. That includes $365,000 for 12 months of therapy at the Center for Neuroskills, $285 an hour for physical therapy, and $1,800 a week for speech therapy. In 2013, Zach's therapy bills may reach $200,000.
Zachary goes through hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to maintain the amount of therapy that he needs to get them, have a larger limit, holding people responsible for their responsibility has made it so that Zachary will be able to continue his therapies, will continue to increase in his mobility, and get that opportunity for his socialization. The things that he does deserve, things that were taken from him, not injured.
If there's no accountability, then there's no responsibility.
And no hope for Zach to continue his progress and share his story.
If you suspect a concussion, it's tell someone, this because someone would have done that for me. I wouldn't use your talking about this subject, and I wouldn't be in the position that I'm in now.
On the far left is Brian Howell, who's a former student athlete at Mount St. Charles and graduate of Connecticut College and concussion survivor. His dad, parent, coach, and an alumnus at Mount St. Charles. And Jacob Madalena, who is a current student here in the 11th grade, is a student athlete, also a concussion survivor, and his mother, Tammy, and daughter Association. And Melissa Robidoux is a physical therapist for performance physical therapy. She specializes in orthopedics, the neurological and post-surgical rehabilitation. So with age, I'm going to ask each one of them to speak a little bit. And then we will have time if you'd like to ask any one of the panel members a question. But I think I'm going to start by, I have to share the mic so we only have one, with Doreen Grasso, perhaps a response to this particular film that you just saw.
Good evening, thanks for having me. It's a pretty sobering video. It's a little old, but it still brings forth all of the importance of concussion protocol, which is in every state now. Every coach has to take a test every year so they know concussion protocol and it's return to play to protect athletes. And so in this instance, there was an athlete that was sent back in. We really can't rely on the athletes to report, especially if they've gotten a concussion, because they're the concussed child. So one of the things that we always report at the Brain Injury Association is it takes a village. So it's usually someone who is a parent, a friend, a coach, a teacher, someone who sees a child every single day that notices that something's off and something different. So what we're really trying to do is change the culture so more students feel comfortable to self-report, so it's not this being stigmatized for saying something about someone else. So we're always trying to tell people to be a good teammate, be a good friend, say something. If you see something, say something. And in this case, because if someone goes out and they're concussed and then they go out again and they have that jostling of the brain while they're concussed, that's usually when something is more long-lasting and a lot worse than it would have been if they were just taken off the field.
I think in respect to that film, lots of things strike you, but I think one of the things that the physician who said, had he just not gone back in the game, everything would have been okay. Wow. So we're going to turn the microphone over to Jacob Matalina, the youngest member of our panel, and he is a concussion survivor, has experienced several concussions, and he's going to speak a little bit about those events and also the post-concussion events, and perhaps even speak about how those injuries have impacted his life.
Hello, everybody. So I'm a junior here at Mount St. Charles. I'm a tri-sport athlete, well, for the most part. My first concussion happened my junior year. I unfortunately also had shoulder surgery back my freshman year and was unable to participate in my hockey and lacrosse season. So that was a tough go. But by the end of my soccer season, we were having a very good season, and I unfortunately playing club hockey, sustained my first concussion and had stitches underneath my chin. It was the first time that I really considered myself having a concussion. I had gotten hit in the head before, I've hit kids hard, I've gone to the boards, felt pain, but nothing like this. It was very hard to concentrate in the moment. I was helped off the ice, a little dazed, and I just knew in that moment that something was a lot different and that I needed more help than I had had before. And the recovery for the first one was, I'd say, the hardest out of the three that I've had. It took a while to really adapt with the pain in my head and the recovery that I had to go through to get back to normal. And for me, the hardest part was getting back to school. As students here, we know that we have a lot of work. There's a lot every day, a lot of pressure that's put on us. And for me as a student, it was just hard keeping up with everything. Fortunately here at Mount, we have a very fantastic guidance program, and they really helped me get back together. They worked with me every time I needed to, and they made sure that I got the help help I needed to get back on track. A few months later, in March, I sustained my second concussion. It was the second in the year, playing hockey for Coach Bilal here in a very competitive playoff game where I was targeted at open ice, hit in the head. And as I skated off the ice, once again, I knew something was wrong. I sat down in the locker room right up against the wall, completely dazed, wasn't too aware of what was going on. And in that moment, I was very scared. For anybody that's got a concussion before, it hurts very badly. And then at one point, my dad was next to me, my coach was next to me. I didn't even notice when it happened. The next thing I know, I'm at the hospital. The ride there, my mom here remembers, I did not know what was going on. She would ask me questions on how I was doing, and I was unresponsive. I had lots of trouble paying attention. And for me, as a whole, that was probably the scariest moment I have encountered. Not knowing what is going on around you, not having the full ability to grasp your surroundings, it's very difficult to comprehend, and a lot of people do not understand the true power concussion has on a student. And after that second concussion, my parents were able to get me to see a special concussion doctor up in Boston, and they took my recovery very seriously. For about 6 months, I was unable to work out, go to sports, any sort of real physical activity, because their fear was that I would do something worse and ultimately just make it harder on myself. Along with that, it was just a really long process. For me, I love being active, I love sports, it really just keeps me going. But to be that far away from sports I've played my entire life, it was hard. And to complete my story, this past October in soccer, I sustained my third concussion, making it 3 in 1 year. And that one was not as bad, but just realizing this has happened again in 1 year was probably the hardest part. For me as a whole, I've just changed a whole lot since everything that has happened. One thing that often concussion survivors deal with is some anxiety, and for me personally, that has been the case. With the pressure of school, getting back to sports, just in the competitive environment that students today live in, it's a lot on you, and without the proper help, it can really build up. And to anybody that thinks that they may be going through something similar, even if it's not concussion related, I advise you just talk to somebody. Talking helps a lot, and to all student athletes, it's not worth it just building up a lot of pain. And that concludes my story.
It's quite a story, quite a journey. When I asked Mother to maybe fill in some of the holes and just speak about how this whole, these experiences of your son impacted you, how you saw them impact him, and also how they impacted your family life.
So we made a decision to come to Mount to play hockey. So that was one of the #1 decisions when we were looking at schools. We played hockey since we were 3. Hockey is an important part of our life. We played club hockey, so we usually play hockey year-round. So when we got the first concussion about a year ago, October, I would say it really affected the family. The headaches that Jacob continued to have off and on continued probably for about 6 months. We went through therapy, all 3 concussions, to build up neck muscles again, to help with eye-hand coordination, as well as making sure that we were caught up with school, which caused a lot of anxiety being able to catch up. It also affected grades. We look at Jacob and where he is today and where he you know, things continue and, you know, the classes continue. The second concussion was scary as a family. As we said, we walked out of hockey and you would have thought he drank a case of beer. We got to the car and immediately he was unresponsive. We got him to the hospital and we were in and out of the emergency room 4 times that weekend with IVs in trying to take the pressure off his head because the head was so bad. When I watched that video and I watched the person walk, it reminds me of what I went through with him on the second concussion. We're fortunate that we live in New England. My husband's in the medical field. We were able to get him into UMass, Boston, and he worked with some of the best concussion doctors in the world. They worked with the Patriots. They worked with all those guys that had concussions, and they put him on a protocol. And you know, it took 3 or 4 months with therapy and working with them to get him finally released to play soccer. And his goal, his pediatrician said, you know, it's probably number 3 after football and hockey. You maybe shouldn't be in goal. He said, we're going to take a chance. It'll be fine. And he took a knee to the head halfway through the hockey soccer season. So 3 concussions in a year. And as Jacob said, we continue to have headaches. It affects sleep. It affects school. It affects family. He loves sports. So, you know, we're running track now. We're a little nervous with hurdles because we think maybe we should be doing hurdles so we don't fall on our head. But, you know, he's taking some of his traits, the things he's really good at, and saying how could we maybe not play a contact sport, at least for the next 12 months or so, and heal and make sure it gives the brain the time to heal. I spent a lot of time in Minnesota for my job, so I see a lot of people that have played hockey throughout their lives and that have sustained multiple concussions and the side effects they still have today. So I pray that the folks, you know, the 2 that are on stage with me don't have some of the issues that others have. We don't know. You know, once you jiggle that brain, what can happen later on in life? You need that brain to be successful. So, thank you.
Our next speaker on the panel, Brian Belial, and a graduate of what year? 2013, and then a graduate of Connecticut College of 2017. And I was kidding him when he came in. He's now working on Wall Street, but he's a banker, so he comes money. He's going to speak about his experiences. He's a concussion survivor as well.
Thank you, Ms. Lawrence. Yeah, Jay was very well spoken and, you know, very impressive because I think I offer a unique experience and perspective. You know, a lot of the things Jake said, coming from a high school student, that's incredible, and that's an extremely mature approach. You know, I obviously, you know who I am sitting next to, you know the family I come from. I had my first concussion my senior year, and you know, I was named captain that year for Mount, but it happened preseason. And back then, it's amazing it's not too long ago, but research on concussions wasn't really on the forefront. And, you know, I really didn't know much about concussions. There wasn't any panels like this. And I received my first one in a, you know, half-season team. I was playing for, you know, the Saints, and I got hit, and I remember feeling dazed, and you know, all the symptoms Jake was talking about, I felt too. And I came off the ice, and I didn't know what it was. I felt different, and I felt automated, and I was nervous. But the way I was taught, the way I was brought up, you know, and you know, to be tough, you gotta be tough, right? And I was always a tough guy and a tough kid, and always walked through pain. And, you know, I got hit like this, and I was like, I can't go back out there. I can't go back out. I can't get back on the ice. I can't even think. So I got off the ice, I took the game off, and I still, you know, I didn't tell anyone. Jake told someone, you know, I didn't tell anyone. I kept it to myself. That was my first concussion, and no one knew about it. Then I took a week off, I would say, because I was sick. You know, I wasn't sick, I was concussed, but I was sick. And, you know, I started skating again, and I was symptomatic, right? I was experiencing the symptoms, and I was skating. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, even before Mount, I got hit again. And this time it was a little worse. And that's when I got off the ice and took the rest of that game, and then I went to my dad. He wasn't coaching, but I went to my dad and I said, there's something wrong. I can't think in school. You know, I can't. And I was in a couple AP classes. You know, I was a good student. Academics was always first for me, but I couldn't think. I was doing poorly on homework. I couldn't focus at home. You know, I was sensitive to light, sensitive to noise. And then, you know, obviously there was something more. My dad brought me to the University of Orthopedics, and I met with a doctor who I'm still friendly with today. He diagnosed me with my first concussion, right? My first concussion, but it was my second. Still haven't told him that I already had one previous to that. So I took the protocol. You know, I took 2 weeks and or 3 weeks, and the symptoms started to subside. But I was still symptomatic. But I wanted to play in that first game, right? Senior year, you want to play in that first game. And you know, what did I do? What did dumb Brian do? Played in the first game. Told my dad I was okay. Told the doctors I was okay. You know, told Coach Bill Weil I was okay. Went into the game and I got demolished. First game back on the ice. And I went to the hospital, spent the night in the hospital, and it was, I can probably say it was probably the worst 2 months of my life. What's that? It was terrible. It was horrible. I was, you know, depressed. Couldn't go to school. I was out of school for a month, and you know, like Jake was reiterating, now it's unbelievable. They were unbelievable when I was here with the support, and my dad and my grandfather obviously super supportive. But it wasn't, you know, looking back, if I would have just taken the time and not played in the first couple weekends and waited for my symptoms to actually subside, I probably would have gotten hit, and maybe it wouldn't have been what it was, you know? And that was a huge learning experience for me, right? Huge learning experience. And there's a lot of underlying, you know, emotions and different elements to my story, and I could go on and on, but I think the one thing I learned from, you know, the back-to-back concussions is, if I would have just taken the time, or, you know, and let my symptoms subside, or, you know, really taking the time to let your brain heal, I think I would have, you know, probably been able to play the entire senior year, or whatever it may have been. But, you know, I went on to play at college the next year, and going through my concussions and learning a lot about concussions, right? I went to my doctor every other week, and he's an incredible guy. And I learned a lot about concussions, but then again, I learned a lot about myself, right? And I learned what triggered my concussion symptoms. I learned how to manage, again, a lot of the stuff you learned about with nutrition and exercise. And, you know, I learned a ton about myself, and I think I found myself at college, and was able to learn from my experience at Mount. Luckily, right? Look back, it's lucky. I'm lucky that I didn't experience more severe repercussions. And just to, you know, give you another little story at Con is, after my sophomore year, I had a very, very good sophomore year. I was doing preseason testing for my junior year, and I had an overexertion, right? I was trying to beat one of my buddies in pull-ups, and, you know, I tried to get that extra pull-up, and I had an overexertion to my brain. And I heard a pop, and I just heard that something was totally off, right? And, you know, I did for a second, because I wanted to play my junior year, I tried to have that high school approach. And I was like, you know what? Ignore it, it'll subside, it'll eventually subside. And I went into the tryouts that week, and they weren't subsiding. In the classroom, couldn't focus at Con College. I'm paying enough money to go to Con College. I think I need to focus in the classroom. And then I remember I left I think it was the econometrics class. I left, I walked out to the green, called my dad. I was like, I'm done playing hockey. I cannot do the symptoms anymore. So it's over. Can't do it. So, you know, I took off my entire junior year. It was hard for me, really hard, because you want to play with your buddies, right? All my best friends are hockey players. A luckily I had a couple other non-athlete friends, but you know, you want to be a part of the team. You want to play the sport you love. That's all I do. Right? That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to play hockey. And then, you know, I found other ways to be involved on campus, and you know, I again found myself. Hockey's not everything. It's just a game. It's a great game. It's, you know, the love of my life is freaking hockey. But it's something you know, it's just a game. Health is the most important. So I think the learning experience is just taking the time and be honest with yourself. So.
Amazing stories. We're going to ask his dad to fill in some of the blanks, and then also add a coach's perspective.
Well, I made a lot of the speeches. This is probably one that one of the more difficult ones, because I'm not proud of what I did years ago to my son. See, when Brian, since he was that small, was always the best player. Always my key guy, and I coached him since he was that tall. So he was my guy, my player, my son, and he was going to be that guy eventually that was going to be part of this big Mount St. Charles tradition that me and my father were going to create. So he was my dream come true. He was going to be that kid who put on that jersey and going to have that Belial name. So right then and there, that's the wrong perspective. So I'm in the trifecta here. I've got a son, I'm a father, I'm a coach. What was missing was the Holy Spirit. So Brian tells the true story. It was his off season, just like you guys all play your Saints, and Brian did get hit. And I was at the game that he got hit initially, and I asked him if he was okay, you know. But I should have taken the approach was, no, you're not okay. You know, but I wasn't as educated as I am now. You know, I played the game, you know, you got your bell rung, you kept playing, and when your father's the coach, and it's Bill Belial, you keep going. You know, you keep going. And then back then, they weren't educated either. They didn't wear helmets back then. But this young boy suffered his concussion. I didn't know, and I made the foolish mistake of allowing him to make the decision whether he should play. Because not only was he good, but also college coaches were coming to see him play. It was Brown and a lot of other, so he got hit. I kind of like, oh geez, I hope he's not too hurt, you know what I mean? Because, you know, all right, that's it. The same mentality was, okay, miss a week, but he's got a big game coming up, I hope, because I know Brown's going to be there, and I know Kobe's going to be there, whatever the coaches that were lined up to come to see him play, so I hope he can play. And kind of like my conversation, are you all right? He said, yeah, Dad, I'm good. I said, you sure? You sure? Okay, good. That's not the approach I should have taken. So sure enough, maybe 2 games later, and now he's attracting attention, but he got clocked, big time clocked. And he came off that ice and raged like I've never seen him, and throwing his gloves off. And I said, you know, now we got something serious. This is something bad happened. I said, it did. So we got to the guy who saved this young boy's life, was Dr. Peter Chris, a neurologist. And, you know, he took Brian under his wing at that time, and he only sat out. What he's not telling you is, you know, and he lied, and I didn't encourage the lie, but it's his senior year, and he only took, what he should have taken was 2 months off at least. He only took 2 weeks off, or 3 weeks off, that's all it was. And to him, feeling as dizzy as he was feeling better, but he still wasn't himself. So he went out in that game up in Mount St. Charles, and we were playing Cranston West, and he got absolutely killed like I'd never seen a hockey player get killed. A blind side, shoulder to head hit that was just ugly. And the young boy didn't lie on the ice. He came to the bench like a zombie, staggering. And it wasn't even a penalty, it was staggering to the dressing room. And I went in with him, and that's when I witnessed something that I thought my son was going to die. He couldn't think. He didn't remember a thing, an absolute thing. So we came back, and for 2 months the school was great. But Brian didn't go to school for a whole month. He tried to go to the mall, he couldn't go and come back crying. He said, I can't even go on the mall, these lights are ridiculous. I can't even think straight. He couldn't use his phone, he couldn't go on, even watch TV. He'd come every other night into our bedroom. I can't take it anymore. I can't take it anymore. So finally, after 2 months, he started to feel better. But the story gets worse, because he wants to play in the playoffs. And again, uneducated, Dr. Chris, he's again telling Dr. Chris, and he was feeling so much better. But don't forget, this is 2 concussions in almost 2 concussions, it could have been a third, in less than 4 months. And here we are, we're heading to the playoffs, and he's going to play in the semifinals at Coventry. Sure enough, scores 3 goals, whatever it is, but he got hit. And he came back, are you okay? And he's kind of like, yeah, I'm all right. Right then and there, I should have taken him out of the game because he got hit, but he wanted to go back out there. And he led us to the championship game. But then the worst thing was, in the championship game, he got hit again in the championship game. And he came off the ice staggering, and he went under the runway. And this is a decision that I am embarrassed about. And he said, I've got to get back in the game. He said, no. So as the game wore on, and the game was probably getting closer, here I am. He's looking at me, I gotta get back in the game. He says, you can't, I've got my wife behind me. You better not. You better not. You better not. And I did. And I got back in the game. And yes, he scored an empty net goal that made his life, so much happier, but didn't make mine. We won the game. Yes, he was one of the stars of the game, but it affected his college life, because he got another one. So the story is, always put your child's safety first, and I learned that concussions are the most, I think, of all the injuries. You can break a bone, and you can find out what it is, you can tear your ACL, you can find out what it is, but your brain, you don't know unless you're living it. So please, if your son is concussed, you take the responsibility. Find a person that's safe, like Peter Chris, or somebody that you can talk to and be honest with. You'll be better off for it. I'm glad he's healthy today, and I thank Peter Chris for that, and I thank my wife for that. Because put your son first before the sporting event. It's not worth it.
So we have one, to hear from one more panelist, Melissa Robidoux, a physical therapist, a performance physical therapy. She specializes in neurological rehabilitation.
Hello, thank you for having me. Obviously, you can see one of the key things I wanted to touch on is how important the recovery and the treatment process is, and to not rush back to activities. You can hear how vulnerable you are in that beginning stage to getting a second injury, and so that's where physical therapy can also come in. So, well, first I wanted to mention the majority of athletes do recover within like 7 to 10 days or a week or so, 2 weeks after a concussion. Unfortunately, I know these 2 gentlemen had some longer lasting effects than that, but majority of athletes do recover very quickly. So, but even with that, you want to take it seriously. You want to follow a stepwise protocol to return to sport. And not only return to sport, but return to school, return to learn, right? So you really have to be able to get back to your normal activities and back to school before you can even think about returning to sport, in my opinion. Sometimes people try to jump back too quickly, but the return to sport protocol, So even if you get pulled that day from your game, minimum, you should be out of sport for a week, technically, until you hit that, you're cleared by a medical professional to begin to sport. And then another thing I wanted to just touch upon is if you do have symptoms after that 7 to 10 days, if you're still having headaches, you're still having dizziness and balance problems, that's where there are resources to try to help get you better faster, and that's physical therapy is one of them. You want to also make sure that your pediatrician or your coach does refer you to a specialist that does see these types of patients, like Dr. Kriz or like the Brain Injury Association. So there are resources out there. And one of the other things I wanted to mention too is newest research. Everyone always thinks the immediate rest after, which you do. You want to have immediate rest from all activities, screen time, anything like that in the first 24 to 48 hours. But the newest research is showing that we do want to get people back to activity as soon as they can. It's actually healthy for the brain to start to, you want to go for walks every day, you want sub-symptom activities. You don't want to just be a couch potato for that whole week. So again, it's important to see someone who knows those important steps to take to get you better faster.
So I wanted to just kind of pick up on the return to learn. I also teach at Rhode Island College, so I see some people that come in and with several concussions. I think of one student in particular that had like 6 or 8, and they're basically on the college equivalent of an IEP. And so one of the things that we passed out was like for the heads up here, when you look at all those symptoms, it just depends on where in the brain was actually hurt, depending on, it could be any combination of those symptoms. Like I got a concussion and it affected my occipital lobe, so it affected my vision. Some people it might be vestibular issues, which is balance. It could be cognitive issues. So you need to be aware of that and look at those, be as parents and people who support children all the time, know what the symptoms are of concussion. Because when you go back to school, I'm all about returning to learn. I would say you only have one brain. So you have to make sure that you use it because you need to continue far beyond sports. And the adolescent brain isn't quite there yet. Their need for thrill and seeking thrill is much higher than their ability to reason as far as holding back. So my thing that I always say to people, we want to prevent concussions to start with. So the best way to deal with concussions is not to get one. But if you do get one, there's the school here, there are PT, the Brain Injury Association is solely dedicated to people that have brain injury, whether it be acquired or traumatic brain injury. So know that you have resources because, basically, when you, what is it, Maya Angelou that says, when you know better, you do better. So we know better now. So thank you.
And so, how about any questions? Yes, I'll repeat your question. And to whom is it going?
It's actually to the panel.
Yes.
Really. So it's actually 3 parts, but is the baseline concussion test still an important aspect to making sure that student athletes
Let's take that first. Baseline concussion, the importance of the baseline concussion thing. Doreen, you want to take that one?
So through the Rhode Island Department of Health, and we offer free baseline testing, which Mount St. Charles has really taken advantage of over the years. So it's really good that so many kids have a baseline test. So it's a series of 6 sub-tests that check reaction time and memory, and it's really a tool for neurologists to use. I always tell the students, I hope you never need to use this test, because that means that they have suspected concussion or you have a concussion. So a neurologist looks at it post-concussion and looks at the difference between the 2.
So here, we try to make sure that every student, athlete or not, has a baseline test every 2 years.
and who keeps that Does the school actually have the results of that?
You want to speak to that? Who keeps that? That keeps a record of it. Yeah, so we have it. And anyway, you have access to it.
Okay.
You have access.
I mean, my son's been a student athlete here, but he's in his third year, and I'm not sure if he's had it, but that's okay.
Unless he was absent when he's had it. He's maybe had it more than once.
Okay, I hope so. That's good.
Any other questions?
I wouldn't, the baseline concussion test is helpful, definitely helpful, but, you know, you heard Jake's story, you heard my story. You know, the kid, it's on the individual. You know, I wanted to get back into the game. I took the baseline concussion test. I passed it, and I was severely symptomatic. If I want to get back in the game, I can pass my own baseline concussion test. I've trained my brain to do so, and you know, that's, again, immature on my part, but I was able to do it. So it's a useful tool, for sure, to know, for the individual to know, oh, this isn't right, so that you can notice your symptoms are activated when you take it, or mine were anyway. But to rely heavily on the baseline test, I don't find it 100% useful. Others may, but as a kid who went through it, I didn't have that be 100% effective. I disagree.
I disagree. He went back on the first one, but if he would have taken that test after the second one, it would have definitely would have failed it. I think for uneducated people who don't know as much as we do, I think a baseline at least will help them. So I think it's on the extreme side, but I think I'd rather be cautious than not cautious. So I think for those kids out there that, you know, they need a baseline so that if they don't know if they're having a concussion, at least this will make you think that it's severe. So I think just having that is important.
And to your point, I would make sure he has one, because Jacob took half of it freshman year and didn't have one.
Yeah, no, I won't.
So we didn't have one. So what we do now, in working with the neurologist at concussion clinics.
So I'm with Brian on this one. I would not solely rely on the baseline test. I went through a lot of time of recovery, unlike Brian, and I did extremely well on the baseline test, but as you know, I came back and got another one. So it's all up to you as a parent and you as a student to really determine, am I able to continue playing? And if so, how much can I push myself?
I agree with what he just said. It's a piece of the toolbox that we use to try to determine whether or not someone is ready to return back to sport or activity. But yeah, you can't rely just on the results of that test. And also, they've done a lot of studies that have shown athletes tank their first test just so that they can start off low, so that if they do get an injury, that they'll kind of look better, you know what I mean? And even the environment, I don't know how it's done here at Mount, but a lot of times the environment you're in when you take the test can affect it. If you're in a group setting, it can affect the scores. So it's really not, you know, that reliable. And then the other thing is that to get back to sport is, yeah, you can pass the test. It's really about, you have to go through the proper exertional testing, make sure that when your body is put to the test that you're asymptomatic, like physically, not just on the computer and on the mental tests.
We believe it, yeah. That's the reason why we take the time to, I mean, it's a tool.
Yeah.
And so it certainly can be used as an aid to physicians very often. Very often, the physician will, ask us, was there a baseline? If there was, can I see it? Yes, David.
Well, maybe something capacity is testing a little bit of concussion. Something else that you're probably pretty sure to do. So you don't get a false positive.
So anyway, it's there, it's here. We try to get every student to take it. And yes.
Why would you not be doing this every year?
I have an answer for that, but I'm going to let Doreen answer that, and that is why not every year?
We do impact baseline testing. It's the one that's been approved by the FDA. That's the one that was approved. Most of the other ones, but they only recommend it every other year for high school students. So we go by their recommendation to do that.
Wouldn't you get it considered early if the child didn't know he had a concussion? Wouldn't you see it in the test, the difference? Or you wouldn't? I don't know a lot about tests. Well, if he's taking a baseline test, it's something.
Okay, what happens is you take the baseline test, and then 2 months later you get a collision. So you take the test again. You compare. Right. It's post-concussion, then they compare the scores. Wrong?
No, just that the post-concussion
Yes.
test is more important to neurologists because they can really see the
Right. The baseline is used as a comparative.
But you're going to compare the two.
Yeah, the physician does
Only
that.
after.
Yeah.
Back to my original question. If you were doing it every year and the child didn't know he had it, and he may not. He may say, oh, I don't like that. Pick up the light, did that headache and it may not be as severe. Wouldn't a baseline test every year show that?
Well, actually, 4 or 5 years ago, we had it done every single year, and then it was recommended. It's kind of waste of resources that test is really valid for 2 years. So we just decided this year that we would do it every other year. Are there any other questions? Yes.
I guess this is for social out or the two athletes. How would you convince or cheer on kids who, or get kids to like actually admit that they have concussion symptoms? So
The question is how, if you know somebody, a teammate, had a collision, was suffering from looks like symptoms, how could you encourage that person to do what you didn't do? And that was, look, I'm hurt. So, because often, and you both did it, we hide the symptoms so we can't play. Anybody want to speak to that?
I think just here's real stories, when me and Jake aren't sitting up here making stuff up, it's happened. Like, we went through it. If I had to, that's why I'm like, I feel proud of Jake. I see a lot of myself in Jake, where I wish I just did what he was doing. Right? I wish he's doing the right thing, and he's going to thank himself when he goes to college and he can focus in classes. He's not going to have that burden, right? So I think if I had to tell a peer, it's just hear stories, right? And if you're a friend, it's like you know when you have symptoms. I think you know something's up. So I think just hearing stories, having more panels like this, the more student athletes, I think that's helpful.
For me, just being through this experience, I would directly just tell my first peer to be honest with me. As a matter of fact, the exact game that I sustained my third concussion, a teammate of mine had got hit by the ball when he wasn't watching, when there was a corner kick. And he stepped off to the side, he was dizzy, I thought he was going down. And I had the ref stop the game, I called my coach over, and I would have done anything to make sure he was okay. I called my friend's parents over, because one of them is a nurse, and she evaluated him and made sure he was okay, and he sat out for the rest of the game. And if I saw that in any other student, I would have done the exact same thing. And if I feel like a student or a peer does have a concussion, I would probably say I would just go right to someone that could help more, whether it's guidance, a teacher, their parent themselves. Because even though someone like Brian may want to go back out on the ice, I really don't want somebody to go through anything that he's gone through, I have gone through, or
thought, while this session was going on, we have about 2 dozen student athletes here, and I'm thinking to myself, this was worth it, because they heard these stories. And I think that both these young men have said just what I was thinking, and the power of storytelling. I think if I was 16 years old, believing this as a student athlete, I'd be leaving this from with a different outlook on injuries, particularly head injuries. Any other questions? So, powerful storytelling here tonight, and I want to leave you with this sobering note. I read this yesterday. The CDC just released a study, and connected with the study was the fact that over 1 million diagnosed concussions a year among youth in the United States. Every single year. Diagnosed. How many are undiagnosed? Maybe twice that amount. That's an unbelievable number. So I think, I hope that this was a very informative night. I want to thank our panel. Sharing your stories. I think tonight was a difference maker. It was for me. So thank you. Thank you for coming and good night.